What's going on, everybody? So I decided to try something, and what I'm calling it is a little podcast or audio video cast of what had happened was. What had happened was almost every single Sunday. By the way, I'm Jeff Moody, pastor of church in Durham, North Carolina. We planted this church 9 years ago, and almost every single Sunday when I'm done with church, I have this experience of what just happened. And so I decided this week, I was talking to my wife and to my son, who's 17 now. I was thinking about doing something called What Had Happened Was. What had happened was. And just a basic recap, maybe more so for me than for any of you watching. But if you get value from it, you can certainly let me know by liking, subscribing, sharing. I don't even know where this stuff's being shown at. I'm just recording my first one today, and it's the end of September. And I'm really excited. Today's the 26th of September. And I am, what had happened was, I'm going to tell you about my day. I got up early. I stayed up late last night because my son had football yesterday, a game early. Then we went to the Duke game. And I came by Revive Church on site, filled up the baptism tank, turned the heater on. And then I came home, ate some late dinner, watched South Carolina get beat by Kentucky, which was late. And then I made these little mirrors that I put these decals on little mirrors that I had purchased for the message today. My son makes decals, and I had bought mirrors because I wanted to use an illustration. And we had just procrastinated. So what had happened was I procrastinated a little bit in getting some things done for the message today, last night. So this morning I got up super early. And I drove to Revive Church to make sure the water had been heated, turned off the circulator. We're dealing with some light issues right now that's a pretty big problem. It's going to be a pretty big overhaul to redo all the lights in the sanctuary. So I had to check on those, make sure those breakers were turned on and that kind of thing. And then I was driving around, went to Panera Bread, got some coffee. But back to when I first got here early this morning, Lou Utley, our sound guy, he's here early every Sunday morning. And he said, "What are you doing here so early?" And I told him I was coming to check on the baptistry and the electrical lights. And then it really dawned on me that I was actually here early because my assistant is out of town this Sunday and the next few Sundays. She's in Florida. Her son has a brain tumor, and they've been dealing with this for about 5 years. And they're down there for about a month to do a pretty extensive procedure to biopsy it. And it dawned on me that I was out of town, or I was here early, sort of out of sorts, because Hannah, my assistant, was out of town. And so when it dawned on me, I thought, you know what? I should pray for Hannah and Chad, their daughter Emery, and their son Rich, who has this tumor. So what I decided to do was rechange the entire flow of my message to include a prayer service for Hannah, because I knew she'd be online watching with her family in Florida. So I thought, who would I invite to pray? Well, we do small groups here at our church, and our small groups just kicked off. So I invited some people from one of my small groups that I'm leading, which is an early morning 6 a.m. small group called Prayer Practice. It's where we get online together via Zoom, and we practice praying. And we're praying real prayers, just in a practice mode, for a couple of reasons. One, to be better at praying, and two, to pray together. So I invited some of those people to join me. Lauren Seal joined me, and she prayed, and Mr. Ed Terry, Miss Linda Terry, they prayed. Tiffany Wilson, she prayed, and we just prayed for God to heal Ridge, and we prayed for the Riley family. And it was a neat experience, and we only did that at the 9:45 service for the live stream. And so then I preached my message for the first service and announced that we would have baptism after second service. And then we started our second service. Here's something that happens almost every single Sunday that a lot of people don't know. We start second service 5 minutes late on purpose. And I don't know why, but 11 o'clock service, people are late getting there. So we actually don't start our service until 5 minutes from the scheduled 11 o'clock time. So if you're watching this and you attend our 11 a.m. service, don't start coming even later. All right, start coming earlier, because we're probably going to change that. So I preached The message I'm in right now is I'm following a book that Pastor Chris Hodges wrote. I'm ending it today called Out of the Cave. Last week I taught the ways that Elijah ended up in the cave. We're looking at 1 Kings 19, the life of Elijah, how he ended up in the cave and things within our control that cause us to end up in the cave. And then today was, now that we're in the cave, or if we ever find ourselves in the cave, how do we get out of the cave? And so I preached this message, and from 1 Kings chapter 5 through, chapter 19, verse 5, all the way really toward the end of the book. And I showed 5 basic steps. The first step was a very simple, practical, physical step within our control. Step into recovery. That's not admitting that we're in the cave. That's actually taking a step toward the entrance of the cave, which is also the exit of the cave. Have you ever thought about that? Most of the time, the entrance into that bad circumstance is also the exit out. We have to go back normally. We see that even in this text. But we have to admit that we got a problem, but take a step. And I talked about some physical things and how when our physical bodies are malnourished or tired or overworked or exhausted or whatever, our spiritual is just inevitably going to follow suit. And so before you know it, our spiritual body is going to be where our physical body is. And so I talked about we need to plan and prioritize our eating habits, our sleeping habits, our exercise rhythms and habits. I even made a joke about 1 Kings 19 when the angel in verse 7 or 8, when the angel of the Lord comes and says, get up and eat. And I joked about getting up in the middle of the night and eating. Well, that's something that I do. I get up in the middle of the night and eat. And I discovered half the church in attendance, both services, do the same thing. But I talked about we need to have a rhythm of rest, a rhythm of exercise, and a rhythm of nutrition. We need to make sure we're eating the right things, all right, and getting our physical. Now, I shared, the truth is this, that we can control these things. So we do that. And then I went on and said we need to step into a God encounter. And here's what I meant by that. We need to step into spending time in the presence of God. And oftentimes that means shutting down everything else that's happening. I want you to notice that I'm not saying we demand everybody around us that's loud to lower their voice. I'm saying we remove ourselves from environments that might be loud so that we can hear the low whisper of God found in 1 Kings 19, verse 12. After an earthquake, after a hurricane or a tornado of wind and even fire, God shows up in a gentle whisper. And I quoted Pastor Chris by saying these words, and it works for me, that when it's hard to find the presence of God, if we'll worship Him, His presence will find us. He says something very similar to that for me when I find a difficult time finding the presence. Man, I'll put my AirPods in, put some Christian worship music on and go for a run, and I find that the presence of God actually chases me down and often catches me. And after we step into a God encounter, I talked about stepping into our real identity, who we are, who God says we are. I highlighted, emphasized this particular point with Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do these good things. And I told a story about a little girl that's in the book of Out of the Cave and how she didn't know who her identity was. And I even said that sometimes we see people and we think there's somebody, and then as we get close to them, we realize they're not who we thought they were. That actually happened to me this week, and I almost embarrassed myself, or I really kind of did. But what's worse than thinking somebody is somebody they're not is thinking that we are somebody we are not. And we need to step into that identity of who we are. We're God's masterpiece. We're not our failures, but even more so, I didn't say this, but I meant to say this. What had happened was, I forgot, is that we're not just not our failures, we're also not our successes. We're not our winning seasons or our losing seasons. We are God's masterpiece. The fourth step of getting out of the cave was stepping into a new assignment. And I invited people to join our ministry team here at Revive Church and begin to serve and go on assignment. Now that we know who we are, let's go know what we're supposed to do and do it. We were created to make a difference. I believe that. It's a core value at Revive Church. And then I ended with the last step. And this is what really keeps us from taking one step forward and two steps back. I would submit to you that many times we take one step forward and two steps back because we don't have the right relationships. And I challenged people to step into the right relationships. That was the end of our flow. And then after the 11 o'clock service, we brought all the children back into the auditorium where we worshiped together, and we baptized a husband and a wife. They've been coming to our church for several months now, and they've made a public commitment to Jesus Christ. They believe that Jesus died for their sins, and their little girl even was sitting on our stage with all the other children celebrating these baptisms. So, all of that to say this. What had happened is God really showed off, and he really showed out today at Revive Church. That's a little bit of the story of what had happened was right here at Revive Church. I'll be back next week with another episode of what had happened was. Until then, everybody, visit revivechurch.com for more information. If you like what you heard and what you saw today, we have exciting changes coming to this particular plan. Consider giving to Revive Church so that we can buy some equipment and record even better episodes of what had happened was. You can go to give2revive.com if you'd like to do that. And for the rest of you, man, just plan to join us one Sunday here at Revive Church in Durham, North Carolina. I can't wait to see you next week on the next episode of What Had Happened Was. Be blessed, everybody.